Hello. Hello, everyone online. Okay. Here we go. What is your view on Tonglen meditation? May run. Okay. Next question. That was an easy one. How does one weaken ego? How to practice that informal practice in daily life, combined with how to deal with sustained paranoid jealousy of those we deeply care about. Okay. So think about that. So I'm standing by the river, looking across the river, and I see animals. And then I look, oh, there's two bulls and one cow and a calf. They they have where am I? Over there. Where am I? They feed over there, over there, over there. Then I look at them, so then I can look, and in the seeing, there's seeing. So the mind is silent. But the cows are interesting. So I start to think, which is a bull? So that's a bull. And which is the cow? And then, oh yeah, and oh, there's a calf. Oh, and there's an egret there. I think it's an egret. I'm not sure. So my mind starts to think. Nothing wrong with that. Um, that was this morning. Now, after lunch, I look across and I think, where's my cow? So in that brief period of time, something that was interesting is not there anymore. But my attention now is looking for something because it was interesting. And when I look across now, it's the same green stuff. So just that little bit of experience creates a draw towards uh, the experiential world. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But for a lifetime, we've been drawn to experience by like and dislike, by interest and disinterest. And I think the use of devices now is a very good example of that, where a person will put down the device. This is when I do airports, I do anthropology. And so very few people aren't looking at their devices. Now, obviously, some are reading books, but most are just scrolling through. And that's the mind going out into objects. And it seems like people can't just put it down for a minute and they pick it up again. So the mind has become biased towards that, which is interesting. And there's nothing immoral about that. But as long as attention is doing that, it can never really realize peace because what it's looking at is something that changes and cannot be infinitely interesting. It has to move to boredom or and then you have to have another object. That's the idea of samsara being unsatisfactory. Um, so there's that. Now, what if part of my makeup is that someone someone shames me at a work meeting. Someone embarrasses me in front of all my friends. You could say, oh, that's just an experience. It's like seeing the cow, but it's more than that because now my sense of identity, who I am with my peers, etc., is is highly affected. And so what comes up into my heart is shame, maybe anger. And that meeting has been very toxic. We say that's a good word, toxic. I've been really hurt by this meeting. So now I go home and the vipaka kamma of that meeting starts to come up into the mind. Now, in terms of foreground, background, it's still just an object. It's just an experience, but it's not just, because what it is loaded with is atta. It's loaded with a sense of self. And that's what gives it all this power to cause confusion for myself and others. Now, just as an aside, Vibhu and I were talking about metaphor. And when I say background, foreground, the difficulty with language is that language is dualistic. So when I say background, foreground, it sounds like background is a thing. So it sounds like there are two things called the background, the foreground, but that's not what I'm pointing to, because I'm just pointing to awareness, and awareness is not a thing. Can I? You can't, so that's the difficulty of language. So any metaphor falls apart. Because if I say to you, background, foreground, you start to look for the background, then that won't work. So what do you say? Well, then you say Pinyang Niang. It's like this, and then say nothing. Or Ploi Wang, let go. That's why teachers say so little sometimes about these things, because whatever the English word, when you concretize something, when you make a concrete thing, awareness is not a concrete thing, but it is. So then I play around, like I say, listen to sound. Is awareness the same as sound? Is it different? And you can't say either. It's neither separate but you see it permeates everything. So those kinds of inquiries are things that I find very, very interesting, but they're very difficult to actually talk about because language is so dualistic. So maybe say nothing or just tell bedtime stories. Maybe that's better. But there is a subtlety here. So when I'm looking at the cows back to the river, Brahma bulls, I guess they are, they have the big hump, right? We don't have those in Canada, or have never seen. So then I look and it's interesting. But then I can let go of the thinking. I can just see, in seeing, there's just seeing. Now, if I can sustain that for long periods of time, that opens to peace. Just that simple. But it's very hard to do for long periods of time because it doesn't satisfy tanha. It does in the beginning because it's interesting. I haven't seen the bulls before. But if they were just standing there for 6 hours, boring. And my mind would seek an interesting object, and I'd be, so to actually sustain awareness of the way things are, one of the difficulties is that it's not interesting. So peace is not interesting to tanha. That's why, like, we're in the middle of the retreat now. It's very tempting now to plan your future because that'll be interesting. What you're going to do when you leave the retreat. And I'll do this, and then I'll do that, and that's rebirth. Now, to actually let go of rebirth and just say, oh, the mind is seeking something, is to look at bhava. It can sense, I want to do something. And just to look at, I want to do something and witness it is very subtle, very subtle. Now, I had a lot of that as a young monk because it was so boring. It was so, because I had no cultural, like at what was it? Banbue. It was the most culturally deprived situation I've ever lived in my life. There was nothing. Like there was absolutely nothing. And you say, oh, you can really practice there. Great. But I just suffered there because my mind wanted to do something interesting. I wanted to read. I wanted to talk with people. I wanted to some kind of cultural inputs. I wanted a joke that I could understand. And so then just witnessing that, I didn't realize what was going on, but just witness, it's just the desire to have something or do something, watching, actually was a big lesson in finding that witnessing and being with the uninteresting. But that usually doesn't happen in lay life. Mostly you just get overwhelmed by things which are very, very distracting and powerful. So back to this question, or back to the meeting. So you're at a meeting and someone, says something really offensive and hurtful to you, and maybe even, you've been kind to them, so it's even betrayal. Then you walk away from it with this deep, deep pain. And then what is significant about the deep hurt is the language that comes out of it, and the language is the language of atta, self. Oh, why do they do that to me? And I was so good to them, and I'm going to get back to them, and it's not fair. And the mind now becomes obsessed, not just with the emotion, but with the whole sense of self, I. And that's what really is in terms of both these questions, how does one weaken the ego? How to deal with sustained paranoid jealousy of those we deeply care about? It's the meanness or the I-ness of the thinking processes that you have to look directly at. And if you look directly at it, you'll never find a person, because it's not a person. It's a sankhara that is conditioned. So the classic way of doing that, well, who's jealous? But then you have to really look at the I making. We call it in Pali ahankara mimankara, the I making, my making. If you really look at that, it doesn't exist. It vanishes, but it keeps coming up because that's the power. That's what attachment is. But if you can keep your attention on the I making, my making, on the way the thinking mind is creating a sense of I, and you observe it, then you are processing the emotion. And then you're probably more aware of the body. So in the example, I come home from the meeting, and then I'm sitting at dinner table and I'm talking with family. The memory comes up and I just blah. So they did to me and they did this. I vent because it's all pent up, which is fine. You have to vent sometimes. It's just so in you. You have to get it out. So I vent a few times. My family no longer has dinner with me. It's okay. Or they're very compassionate. They listen to me. But after a while, after the venting, I keep going back to that. Mind keeps picking it up. So the memory is very strong. And because the memory is there, the habit of ahankara mimankara, I making, my making, keeps grabbing it and I get reborn. So the remedy or the methodology is to look at the sense of I being made through thought. And classically, it's who is thinking, who is angry. Now, you won't find anything, but you will get to the heart of the emotion, and then you'll feel its energy or its power, and then you can resolve it. It might take you half a year. If you get really shamed by someone in a culture where face is important, that's going to be hugely, hugely injurious and toxic. So certainly you don't want to see that person again, and you want to be careful. Yeah. And you want to maybe talk to your boss that this is not right. Fine. That's social justice. But in terms of injury, you have to give you time. You have to give yourself the time to process that. And that's the time to just witness the I making, my making. So who's angry? And then as soon as you do that, you observe there is no essential person, but there is memory. It comes up. Oh, who's thinking? Who's angry? That takes a lot of rigor until you start to see how memory conditions the whole thinking process. But when you get something so powerful as how to deal with sustained paranoid jealousy, that's very difficult. So that's coming from another place. It's not coming from the immediate yesterday's committee meeting where you got hurt. That's coming from deeper, deeper place. And sometimes Therapy helps. You talk to a therapist, and they talk you through child abuse or something, or so there are deeper issues which we face as humans, which are um, we don't see we don't see their origin. We don't know where it's come from because it can make no sense at all. It makes no sense, but it's deeply painful and deeply disturbing. And that's where sometimes um, our way of awareness does not work because these things are rooted in something unseen. So that's where a counselor who is very intuitive can be of help. I don't know if that is true in this case. We tend to say that's a vipaka karma, but if you just slough it off to a past life, I would suggest maybe there are better ways for this person to look at it. So, like I've worked quite a bit with people who have had child abuse, and um, the memories are so deep. It's very hard not to jump into the persona of fear and self-hatred. That's where the mind goes. And so the therapist then tries to get the person into the body, into the feeling, and understand them in that way. But in either case, um, the methodology would be the same. Person would have to look at the I making, my making in the midst of this. I mean, that's a very, very difficult state of mind. Sustained paranoid jealousy. Yeah, very painful. I would love someone you love, right? Very, very painful. And then, of course, the person would feel guilty because they're a good person. They've come to a retreat. They're a very good person. So then you get the compounded problem. You get the compounded problem of an anusaya, a type of or kilesa, whatever language we want to use, coming into consciousness triggered by a loving relationship. So there's some aspect of fear in it. So that comes up. And then because they're a good Buddhist, they say, "Oh, I'm terrible. I'm a terrible person. Why does this happen to me?" But that's still I making, my making. It's still the same problem. The intention is good, not to follow and to understand it. So my sense of the solution is you have to go right to the sense of I making, my making. Most of the time it's not that heavy, but it's still happening, isn't it? You look at the way the thinking mind preoccupies your attention, it'll be I making, my making. It might be just a simple little plan you have to go play golf, but it'll be you playing golf, right? And maybe you get a new outfit or something like that, or well, get a new set of golf clubs. Or I've never played golf, but it'll still be a me playing the game or doing the thing or worrying. So you just keep going to the I making, my making. Worry is typical, isn't it? You worry about kids, about your health, about work, about the state of the planet, about the economy. And worry is not just strategic thinking. Worry about the company. And the company's having problems. We have to go digital. I was talking to Tantun about his family's publishing business and how publishing printed material isn't a moneymaker anymore. So they have to go to digital. And okay, so you have a business and you have a problem. So strategic thinking is different than worry. Planning is necessary, strategically necessary. What is worry? There's always the I making, my making. And that's what you kind of get really, really good at observing. So I typically use, well, who's thinking and who's worrying? And then I wait. And then I see maybe the memory comes up and who's worried? Who's fantasizing? It's a very good method. You're not trying to find anything, but you are getting to the heart of the problem, to the heart of the problem. If you're trying to find something, then that's not the objective. It's to disengage the I making, my making. And then the emotion is as it is. So say with worry, which is it's a pretty habitual thing many of us suffer from. You look, well, who's worrying? And then you get better and better body awareness. You see there's a contraction in the stomach, your heart's not open. And then maybe you say, yeah, but may I be well. I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. There goes that guy again. But you see what you're doing. You're like what this person said. If this person notices this very difficult emotion coming up and tries to fix it, that it's just a me trying to get rid of it. But if they just say, I love you, I've always loved you, whatever, I will always love you, you're starting to put something else into the mind rather than this horror and the whatever it is. You're putting something more wholesome into the mind. But that's really a very, very difficult one. I'm fortunate I haven't suffered much from jealousy, but then I've never been married. So maybe I don't know if it comes with the territory or not. I've suffered from other things, but sustained paranoid jealousy, that's difficult. I always like when I talk with people, I say, it is difficult rather than it is bad. And I also try to say to people, you're not doing this intentionally. You do not wake up in the morning with, okay, I'm going to do sustained jealous paranoia. That sounds like a good idea. No one does that. No one does that. In fact, they wake up and go, oh, no, please, please, not that mind state. Leave me alone. So what I always say to people, this is not your fault, but it is your responsibility because it's a part of the karma of the mind. And the responsibility is to not believe in it, but not hate oneself for it. And that's always a good reflection. What is my intention here? Is my intention to hurt someone, or is my intention to try to be a good person? And this is just the difficult karma I have to face. Then that's the reality.